الحمد لله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله وطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون صدق الله مولانا العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وأزواجه وذرياته وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, and when they are told, اتَّقُوا مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ, fear what is before you, وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ, and what is behind you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that mercy may be shown to you. We continue with the third ruku of Surah Yaseen. And in this ruku, until now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned many of His signs. Beginning with those signs which are present on the land, thereafter mentioning those signs which are in the sky, and finally mentioning His signs in the ocean. And these signs, number one, they indicate towards the fact that Allah Ta'ala exists. So this is something which refutes the claim of the atheist. Any individual who finds it difficult to believe in the existence of Allah Ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting him to ponder over the creation. Number two, Allah Ta'ala, by mentioning these signs, he also indicates towards the fact that there is only one Allah. And this is to refute the claim of the polytheists, the mushrikeen, some of whom used to worship 360 idols in Makkatul Mukarramah. Some even more than this. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that during the days of ignorance, such was our condition that sometimes we would see a date and we would take this date as our deity. We would say that today this is our God. And he says after a while, when we would become hungry, this is the very date that we would eat and consume. But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed these individuals. That prior to the advent of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this was their level of ignorance. But after spending some time in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the spirituality of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was so great that he transformed these individuals, not only that they themselves became worthy of entry into paradise, but they became the leaders of the entire world, and so many people became the means of entry into paradise because of them. And until the day of Qiyamah, they will remain guides, that if anyone was to take their life and follow in their footsteps, they will also be given success in this world and the hereafter. One can understand from here the greatness of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and likewise the greatness of the knowledge which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed inside the glorious Qur'an. When the very first verses, Iqra' bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just 5 verses. After these 5 verses were revealed, for 3 entire years there was no revelation. This is known in the terminology of the ulama as the period of fatra. So fatra is that time when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam received no revelation. And he was extremely anxious that I received the first revelation and now Jibreel is not coming to me. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam would go in the cave of Hira, anticipating that maybe Jibreel will come down, because this is where I received the first revelation. But for 3 entire years, Allah Ta'ala did not reveal a single verse. So the Mufassirin explained that the reason for this is that there is so much knowledge which Allah Ta'ala has kept in these first 5 verses of Surah Alaq, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it required him 3 entire years to grasp all of this knowledge and take it in. So just as a teacher does not give the second lesson until the first lesson has been studied correctly and properly, Allah Ta'ala did not teach the second lesson of the Qur'an because the first lesson required 3 entire years. So just imagine how much knowledge is present in just the first 5 verses of Surah Alaq. So anyway, the second point is that the mushrikeen, the polytheists, they are being invited that ponder over the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this will make you realize that there can only be one Allah. And this has been explained in the previous lessons. And finally, these signs, they also indicate towards the qudra and the power of Allah Ta'ala, that how powerful He is, how great He is. So when these verses were revealed, the Muslims, they would go to the disbelievers, they would go to the kuffar, to the mushrikeen in Makkatul Mukarramah, and they would try and explain to them that, look, after all of these signs and all of these verses that have been revealed, is it not time that you ponder over these verses and you accept the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? So for this, Allah Ta'ala mentions now in the next verse that وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when they are told, meaning when the disbelievers are told, اتَّقُوا مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ, fear what is before you, وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ, and what is behind you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that mercy may be shown to you. Allama Qurtubi rahmatullahi alayhi in his tafsir, he has mentioned quite a few opinions here with regards to what ma bayna aydikum and wa ma khalfakum can refer to. So ma bayna aydikum, we have translated as what is before you, and wa ma khalfakum, what is behind you. One opinion, which is the opinion of Imam Qatada rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that ma bayna aydikum means min al-waqa'i fi man kana qablakum min al-umam, those punishments which the nations before you received due to not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to not accepting the message of the Prophet of their time. So even the people in Makkatul Mukarramah, they are being told that if you were to just ponder over this, that look what happened to those nations before you, then this can serve as an admonishment for you that we need to accept the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, otherwise the same thing could happen to us also. And وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ refers to min al-akhirah, the hereafter. That if you don't obey the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then in the akhirah and in the hereafter, the azab and the punishment of Allah Ta'ala is awaiting you. The second opinion, which is the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, Sa'id ibn Jubair rahmatullahi alayh, and Imam Mujahid rahmatullahi alayh, they all say that ma bayna aydikum refers to ma maza min al-dhunub, that fear the repercussions of your past sins. So whatever sins you have committed in the past, then a person should repent and sincerely ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. Because if a person does not ask for forgiveness and he was to die with these sins in his book of deeds, then on the day of Qiyamah he will be punished for these sins. And وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ refers to مَا يَأْتِي مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ, that those sins which you will commit in the future, fear those sins also. In other words, refrain from committing sins in the future. Do not make any plans of sinning in the future. Hazrat Hasan Basri rahmatullahi alayhi says that مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيكُمْ refers to مَا مَضَى مِنْ أَجْلِكُمْ, your past life. So fear your past life, meaning whatever wrong you've done in the past, again ask Allah Ta'ala for forgiveness. And وَمَا خَلْفَكُمْ refers to your future life. That fear your future life, meaning that in the future, do that which is correct and refrain from doing that which is incorrect. As Sufyan al-Thawri rahmatullahi alayhi says that ma bayna aydikum means min ad-dunya and wa ma khalfakum means min adhab al-akhirah. So they are being told that fear the punishment of this world. If you don't obey Allah Ta'ala, then Allah Ta'ala can punish you in this world also. Even in this world, as far as the disbelievers are concerned in Makkah al-Mukarramah at that time, then the punishment could come down in the form of the battle of Badr. It will come in the form of the battle of Hunayn. And thereafter, until the day of Qiyamah, Allah Ta'ala can send down His punishment in this world. How? That a person who has honor, Allah Ta'ala can change this honor and make him disgraced. A person who is wealthy, Allah Ta'ala can make him poor. A person who is healthy, Allah Ta'ala can make him sick. So even in this world, if Allah Ta'ala wishes, He could punish a person. And وَمَا خَلْفَكُم means the akhirah, that in the akhirah and in the hereafter you will definitely face the punishment of Allah Ta'ala. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma says that ma bayna aydikum means from the matters of the hereafter, and wama khalfakum means from the matters of this world. And finally, there is also one more opinion that ma bayna aydikum means those things which are apparent to you, and wama khalfakum means those things which are hidden from you. Nevertheless, the disbelievers here are being told to obey Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may show mercy upon them. And thereafter Allah Ta'ala mentions that وَمَا تَأْتِيهِم مِّنْ آيَةٍ مِّنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ إِلَّا كَانُوا عَنْهَا مُعْرِضِينَ. Instead of learning lessons from the people of the past, whenever a sign comes to them, they turn away from it. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a sign, then they always turn away from this sign. They are never ready to ponder over it, use it as a lesson, and accept the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This has been their habit and the habit of the disbelievers in the previous nations also and in this nation also. But Allah Ta'ala in the next verse now mentions something very amazing, and He says that for them not to accept in Allah Ta'ala, this is against the nature. For them not to accept one Allah, this is against the nature. For them not to accept the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is also against the nature. For them not to accept Jannah and Jahannam and the life hereafter, this is against the nature. But these people, they have become so stubborn that even when they are told to do something which is in accordance to their nature, just because they do not want to accept the message of a prophet or the message of the believers, they will even make an excuse and try and not carry that act out which usually they used to do and which was part of their life and part of their nature. And an example of this is spending in the path of Allah. That the disbelievers, they would always spend in the path of Allah. This was something which was part of their nature. Even in this day and age, we see that just as many Muslims are very generous and very charitable, you see many non-Muslims who are also very charitable and they spend in charities much from their wealth. So charity is something which is part and parcel of a human being's life. This is why a companion by the name of Hazrat Hakim ibn Hizam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he was that Sahabi who accepted Islam at the age of 60. He spent 60 years of his life in ignorance. At the age of 60, he accepts Islam. And after accepting Islam at the age of 60, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he thinks to himself that how much longer am I going to live now? The Prophet ﷺ said that the average age of my ummah is between 60 and 70. Now he has accepted Islam and he is in the last part of his life according to him. So he says to Nabi ﷺ concerned with regards to the hereafter, that, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, will I be rewarded for the good deeds which I carried out before embracing Islam, so that they may assist me in the hereafter? Otherwise I will have very less in my record. And one of the actions which he was carrying out was spending upon the poor. He used to spend much upon the poor before accepting Islam. So upon this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam replied and said to him that aslamta ala aslafta min khayr. That the reason why Allah Ta'ala gifted you with the prize of Islam is because of the goodness that you carried out in your days of ignorance. What more do you want? You would never have accepted Islam had you not carried out these good deeds. So look, when a non-Muslim carries out good deeds, sometimes Allah Ta'ala, He gifts them with gifts in this very world. Why? Because there is nothing for them in the hereafter. But the greatest gift which they can receive is that because of the good deeds they are carrying out, Allah Ta'ala blesses them with Islam and they leave this world with Islam. And he was blessed with another 60 years after accepting Islam. So he lived in this world for 120 years. 60 years as a non-Muslim and 60 years as a Muslim. Hazrat Hakim ibn Hizam rahmatullahi alayhi. So anyway, regarding this act of spending in the path of Allah, so Allah Ta'ala says that وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, that when it is said to them, أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهِ, that spend from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for you. Whatever wealth Allah Ta'ala has given you, this is from Allah. We have to keep this in mind, that this wealth, we have not acquired it. It is Allah who has given it to us. So, أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهِ. Whenever you say to the disbelievers that spend from that which Allah Ta'ala has given you, now spending was something which was part of their nature. It should have been very easy for them. But قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, the disbelievers, they say, لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, to the believers, أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ. Should we feed someone whom Allah will feed if He wills? Should we feed someone whom Allah will feed if He wills? In other words, they were saying that the fact that this person does not have food is because Allah Ta'ala wants to keep him hungry. Now when Allah Ta'ala wants to keep him hungry, why should we feed him? When a person uses his brain, it sounds like they are saying something which was very intellectual, which made sense. And usually this is when a person's brain works, when he doesn't want to spend on someone. So look at how they came out with this very intellectual proof, that it doesn't make sense spending upon someone whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not spending upon. So this is what they would say, أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ. Now, the Quran does not give an answer to this. So for this we need to understand that number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has made some people rich in this world and some people poor in this world. And both of them are being tested. So a rich person should never feel that he is successful. Nor should we have this in our mind that because he is rich, he is successful. And the same for a poor person. Although you all think that for a poor person, but a poor person is also not successful. But at the same time, the poor person is not a failure and the rich person is also not a failure. So neither is successful and neither is a failure. They are both being tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether they will be successful or whether they will be a failure will depend upon whether they succeed in that test. The richness or how poor a person is, this will not determine whether they have succeeded or failed. It's what happens after this. So if Allah Ta'ala blesses one person with wealth and he utilizes that wealth in the correct manner, he spends it in the correct avenues, and he refrains from extravagance. And extravagance is of two types. One is israf, where a person spends more than he needs to in those avenues which are permissible. So for example, you have food you need to eat, you have drink which you need to drink. But even when it comes to eating and drinking, the Quran says, Kulu washrabu, eat and drink, wala tusrifu, but do not exceed the limits. So even when it comes to halal, when it comes to clothing, so you're allowed to spend on clothes, but one is spending that amount which is necessary, and one is being extravagant in your spending. If 50-pound shoes are going to do the job and you're spending 500 pounds, then this will not justify spending 500 pounds on a pair of shoes when 50 pounds is going to do the job. This is now extravagance. And there is also a second type of extravagance, which is called tabdhir. Allah Ta'ala says, Innal mubadhirina kanu ikhwana shayateen. That these are the brothers of the shayateen, the devils. This is when a person now spends in those avenues which are impermissible and haram. A much higher level of extravagance. So look, a person has wealth, but just because he has the wealth, this does not mean that he has gained success. He now will have to utilize this wealth in the correct manner. He remains part of this test. In front of him is the examination paper of shukr and being grateful to Allah Ta'ala. And as far as other people are concerned, Allah Ta'ala places before them the examination paper of sabr and patience. So they live a life of poverty. Now in this poverty, Allah Ta'ala wants to see that is this person able to endure patience or not. He doesn't even have that amount which he needs. Can he endure patience? قَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَن يَكُونَ كُفْرًا. The Prophet ﷺ says that poverty can lead a person to disbelief. Because a person may feel that I believe in Allah, I am performing salah 5 times a day, I am worshipping Him, and He's not even giving me enough food with which I can spend the next 24 hours. So he could become despondent and he could take himself out of the fold of Islam. So this would be a great test. So poverty is also a great test, but being wealthy is also a great test. Because when a person has wealth, he becomes proud, he becomes arrogant. like Qarun, like Fir'aun. They had lots of wealth. But just because they had all this wealth, this does not mean they were successful. This wealth became the means of their failure. And every person who recites the Qur'an, when he comes across the word of Qarun and Fir'aun, he will never think that these were successful people, despite of how much they had. We despise them, we look down upon them, we'll think, what sort of people were they? So they are both tests, the test of sabr and the test of shukr. An incident comes to mind regarding sabr and shukr. That once, there was this woman who was known for her beauty, extremely beautiful. And she happened to marry a man who had no handsome features whatsoever. No beauty whatsoever. But for some reason they married and life continued. So one day the wife, she said to her husband that you and I are both going to enter Jannah. So he said that, how do you know this? So she replied that in front of each person, Allah Ta'ala places the examination paper of either sabr or either shukr. In front of me is the examination paper of shukr, of sabr, of enduring patience. That you're not handsome at all, there's nothing in you. But despite of that, I've been patient till now and I will continue to be patient till I die. And in front of you is the paper of shukr, of being grateful that you have such a beautiful wife like me. So you have to be grateful upon this. And I've seen that until now, you have been grateful. So I will enter Jannah through the door of sabr and you will enter Jannah through the door of shukr. So this is how a believer needs to look at each situation. If you are happy with the situation you are in, if you are content with the situation you are in, then you need to be grateful to Allah Ta'ala. And if you are going through a difficult time, then at that time you need to do sabr. Then good conditions and evil conditions, good conditions and bad conditions, they are both a blessing for a believer. This is why the Prophet ﷺ says that ajaban li amril mu'min, that how marvelous is the situation of a believer. Inna amrahu kullahu lahu khair, all of his situations in there they are khair and goodness for him. There is no bad situation for a believer. Why? In asabahu sarra shakara fakana khairan lah. That whenever he finds prosperity in his life, he is grateful to Allah Ta'ala. And when a person is grateful to Allah Ta'ala, there is goodness for him. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاءُ الصَّبَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. And whenever he finds himself in a difficult situation, then he endures patience, and in there is also goodness for him. So the first point under this verse which we need to understand is Allah Ta'ala has made some people rich and some people poor, and they are both tests. The rich is being tested, can he handle this wealth or not? And the poor is also being tested, that can he handle this situation of poverty or not? There are two different tests. And a second point to understand here is that a great wisdom behind making some people rich and some people poor is this is necessary for the system of this world to continue running. If every person was rich, who is going to go out to work? So how are the shops going to run? Who's going to work in the factories? There's a need for everything. Someone needs to sew the clothes. Someone needs to be working in the shops. Someone needs to be working in this industry for the entire world to continue running. So Allah Ta'ala has made each person dependent upon someone. So wherever there's a need for doctors, Allah Ta'ala will place this thought in a person's mind that I should become a doctor, and he will become a doctor and he will start working in that firm. If he had so much money and so much wealth that there was no need for him to work, and there were no doctors in the world, this would cause a very big problem. So this is why we find that how Allah Ta'ala is running this entire system. The poor are in need of the rich, so the poor will go out to work. But the rich are also in need of the poor. Because without the poor, if the poor do not do the work, then how is the business going to run? This businessman who is rich, he is only rich because of these poor people that are working for him. So they are both in need of each other. There is no person in this world who is independent. This quality only belongs to Allah Ta'ala. Allahu Samad, Allah is independent. And Allah is so independent that lam yalid wa lam yulad. Nor does He give birth, nor was He given birth. Meaning He doesn't have children, He doesn't have parents. This shows the two stages when a person is dependent on someone. When you are a child, you are dependent on the parents. And when the parents become old, they become dependent on their child to look after them. So Allah Ta'ala is saying that I am so independent, I am not in need of parents to look after me, nor am I going to become old that I will need children to look after me. So lam yalid wa lam yulad. Allahu Samad, Allah is independent. So in this verse, Allah Ta'ala is saying that these people, the disbelievers, look how stubborn they are. That this spending in the path of Allah Ta'ala, which was part and parcel of their life, but when the believers would tell them to spend in the path of Allah, then they came out with this excuse and they began to say that should we feed those individuals whom Allah Ta'ala has kept hungry. In antum illa fi dalalin mubin. You are but in manifest deviation. Now who is saying this? You are but in manifest deviation. You are in an open error. So there are three opinions to this. That in antum illa fi dalalin mubin, either this is what the disbelievers are saying. So the whole phrase is that anut'imu man law yasha'u Allahu at'ama in antum illa fi dalalin mubin. All of this is being said by the disbelievers. And the second opinion is that when the disbelievers said anut'imu man law yasha'u Allahu at'ama, should we feed those people whom Allah Ta'ala is keeping hungry, then the Muslims said to them in antum illa fi dalalin mubin, that you are in an open error. That what you are trying to say, it doesn't make sense. You have understood the whole concept wrong. The concept is that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, if He keeps someone hungry, this doesn't mean He's kept them hungry because He wants them to be hungry. No, this is because He has placed this responsibility upon you that you spend upon them. This is how you should have understood it, and you should have spent upon them, not come out with this excuse. And the third opinion is that in antum illa fi dalalin mubin, this is what Allah Ta'ala is saying. But these are the words of Allah, these are the words of the Qur'an now. Anut'imu man law yasha'u Allahu at'ama. This is what the disbelievers said. And then the Qur'an itself is saying in antum illa fi dalalin mubin. So there are three ways we can interpret this in antum illa fi dalalin mubin. Either the disbelievers have said this, either the Muslims said it, or either it's Allah Ta'ala Himself. Over here there is still one more question, that when these disbelievers, they have not accepted Islam yet, then why are the believers telling them to carry out the good deed of spending in the path of Allah? Normally, the first thing you are supposed to do is call a non-Muslim towards Islam. And it's only after they accept Islam that you can tell them now to perform salah, or give charity, or perform hajj, or fast. All the a'mal and actions come later. Here they haven't even accepted Islam, and they are being told to spend in the path of Allah. So the simple answer to this is that here they are not being told to spend in the path of Allah as an ibadah and as a worship. Rather, they were being told to spend in the path of Allah on humanitarian grounds. That as a human being, these people are extremely poor and are in need of your charity at this moment in time. And Allah Ta'ala has granted you wealth. So you spend upon them. It's just like if there was to be a crisis right now, and we know of a non-Muslim who is very wealthy, then as a human we may say to him that, can you also assist in this cause? So we are not telling him to assist in the cause so that he gains reward or he gains paradise, but we are just telling him to assist in the cause because he has the wealth. As a human, he will be willing to assist. So this is the question and answer under this verse which I have explained. Now, the ruku ends with 3 more verses. وَيَقُولُونَ مَتَى هَذَا الْوَعْدُ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says now that these people, they have no interest as far as accepting the message of the Qur'an or the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is concerned. And they would try and make fun out of the believers that until now you have been telling us that if we do not accept this message, then we will have to face punishment in this world and punishment in the hereafter. So this punishment that you're talking about, and likewise the qiyamah which you are talking about, because you are saying punishment will come in the hereafter, which means the world will come to an end. So وَيَقُولُونَ, they would say, مَتَى هَذَا الْوَعْدُ, when will this promise of punishment come to pass, in kuntum sadiqeen, if you are truthful? In other words, when is Qiyamah going to take place? Can you inform us of the date of Qiyamah so that we can prepare accordingly? So again, we learn from both the Quran and the Hadith that we should not worry about the exact time of Qiyamah. When is Qiyamah going to take place? The date. First of all, we have not been informed regarding this. And when the Prophet ﷺ was also asked regarding Qiyamah by an individual, Hazrat Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that on one occasion a Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked this question, that Mata Sa'ah, when will Qiyamah take place? So instead of giving an answer, Nabi ﷺ asked him a question and said, Ma a'datta laha, what preparations have you made for Qiyamah? What preparations have you made? So he replied that Hubbullah wa Rasulih, that I have the love of Allah and the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in my heart. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied to him that Anta ma'a man ahbabta, that on the day of Qiyamah you are going to be with that person whom you love. If you love Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have made enough preparations. You don't need to worry about when Qiyamah is going to take place. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam also directed us towards this point, that instead of worrying about when is Qiyamah going to take place, worry about what preparations you made for Qiyamah. You don't have time to worry about when it is going to take place. So even in the Quran, when they ask this question that Mata hadal wa'du in kuntum sadiqeen, the Quran straight away goes on to the point of mentioning ma yanzuruna illa sayhatan wahidatan ta'khudhuhum wa hum yakhissimun, that they await only a single scream to seize them while they are arguing. In other words, it is something which is going to happen suddenly. Qiyamah is going to come suddenly. And it's going to come so suddenly that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi have mentioned the hadith of Sayyiduna Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions that there will be two individuals who will begin a transaction of buying and selling clothes. So the seller, he will open up the cloth to show the purchaser, the customer. And before they can complete this transaction and wrap up this cloth again, Qiyamah will take place and both of them will be finished. In the same hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says a person will milk his camel, and before he can place it in a glass and drink this milk, Qiyamah will take place and his life will come to an end. And one person will have a morsel of food and he will place it inside his mouth, but before it can go down his throat, Qiyamah will take place. So suddenly Qiyamah will take place. And this verse, مَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً, that they await only a single scream, one single scream. Imam Qatada rahmatullahi alayhi says that this is هِيَ النَّفْخَةُ الْأُولَى فِي السُّورِ. This is the first blowing of the trumpet, from which we understand that there are two blowings of the trumpet. There are four angels who are famous. One is Jibreel alayhi salam, number two Mikael alayhi salam, number three the angel of death Israel alayhi salam, and number four is Israfil alayhi salam. This fourth angel Israfil alayhi salam only has one duty, which is the blowing of the trumpet for the day of Qiyamah. And the Prophet ﷺ has informed us that the trumpet is already in his mouth. So he's just waiting for Allah Ta'ala to say blow, and he will blow. And as soon as he blows, the whole world will come to an end. This is the first blowing of the trumpet. And as far as the second blowing of the trumpet is concerned, this Allah Ta'ala speaks about, which we will discuss in the next lesson. So in this verse, this is the first time the trumpet will be blown, due to which the whole world will come to an end. وَنُفِخَ فِي السُّورِ فَصَعِقَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah Ta'ala says that the trumpet will be blown, and when it will be blown, everything in the heavens and everything in the earth will perish. Nothing will remain. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Everything on the face of this earth will completely perish. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Only Allah Ta'ala will remain. Besides Allah, everything will come to an end. So مَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا صَيْحَةً وَاحِدَةً. They await only a single scream. تَأْخُذُهُمْ وَهُمْ يَخِصِّمُونَ. To seize them whilst they are arguing. Now the Quran mentions here whilst they are arguing, which, just like we've mentioned some examples in this hadith of people who will be engaged in something and suddenly Qiyamah will take place. So some will be in the middle of an argument, and they will be in the middle of an argument and Qiyamah will take place, and they will not even get the opportunity to complete this argument. And thereafter the Quran says that فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ تَوْصِيَةً وَلَا إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Then they will be unable to make any bequest, any testament, nor shall they be able to return to their families or their homes. One meaning of them that they will not be able to make any bequest is they will not even get the opportunity to ask each other for forgiveness. They will be in the middle of an argument and Qiyamah will take place. Now there's no time to ask for forgiveness. Those that will feel that I have done this wrong to this person, this wrong to this person, he will not get the opportunity to ask for forgiveness, because Qiyamah will take place and it will come suddenly. And those people who are away from their homes, they will not get the opportunity to return home. They will have left their homes with this in mind, that in an hour's time I'm going to come home. But Qiyamah will take place suddenly. Lucky and fortunate will be that individual who will be engaged in doing something which brings the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he dies whilst Allah ta'ala is happy with him. And unfortunate will be that individual that he is engaged in an action which brings the wrath and displeasure of Allah ta'ala, because such a person will leave this world in a state that Allah ta'ala is displeased with him. So Qiyamah is going to take place, and Qiyamah is going to come suddenly. But whether we live till Qiyamah or not, we all have to leave this world. And our Qiyamah is our death. When our Qiyamah is our death, then it's necessary that from these verses of the Qur'an, we place this thought in our mind and daily we ponder over this, that what preparations have I made for my death? And for this, we have to somehow live our lives in such a way that Allah Ta'ala becomes pleased with us. We have to try and do those things which make Allah Ta'ala happy, and we have to refrain from those actions which displease Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Mullah Ali Qari Rahmatullahi alayhi in Mirqatul Mafatih has mentioned the quotation of one of the pious of the past, that he would say, تُحْشَرُونَ كَمَا تَمُوتُونَ وَتَمُوتُونَ كَمَا تَحْيُونَ تَمُوتُونَ كَمَا تَحْيُونَ. You will die the way you lived your life. So if a person lives his life doing good, then there is every chance that even at the time of death, Allah Ta'ala will make it that he is doing something good. And if a person spends his whole life committing sins, then the most possible chance is that he will be committing a sin even in the last part of his life. And on the day of Qiyamah, Allah Ta'ala will resurrect us in that state that we died. So if we die doing good, on the day of Qiyamah we will be resurrected in the court of Allah doing that very good deed. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that a person will die whilst playing a musical instrument, like a flute. So on the day of Qiyamah, he will come in the court of Allah playing this musical instrument. So however a person dies, this is how he will be resurrected on the day of Qiyamah. And for this reason, we have to ensure that we try and live our life by doing good deeds. So this is the reason why over and over again in the Qur'an, Allah Ta'ala reminds us of the akhirah, of the hereafter, of the day of Qiyamah. It's not just that we read these verses and we think that this was something for the disbelievers of Makkah Mukarramah. No, the Qur'an is for you and I. They have lived their life, they have moved on. But the Qur'an is still here for you and I. It's still a message for you and I. So when we read these verses, every time, whenever we read any verse, we need to ask ourselves that what is Allah Ta'ala saying to me from these verses? What is the message to me? And what can I take away from here? So may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala grant us all the ability to prepare for our death, to prepare for the akhirah and the hereafter. May He grant us the ability to do those deeds which will be a means of attracting His pleasure, and may He grant us the ability to refrain from all those deeds which becomes a means of displeasing Him. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.